Good. All right. Good afternoon. Apologies for the delay, but as you know, there's a lot of simultaneous events and quite a lot of news going on today. Once we are finished here, I will be joined by our good friend and colleague Elliot Harris, the UN's chief economist and Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development, along with Nasrul Islam, the lead author of the World Social Report 2021. The report was produced by our colleagues in the Department of Social and Economic Affairs. The Secretary General this morning told the General Assembly that the past 10 days have witnessed a dangerous and horrific surge in deadly violence in the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly Gaza and Israel. He appealed to all parties to cease hostilities now, and he called repeatedly on all sides for an immediate ceasefire. The Secretary General said the fighting has left thousands of Palestinians homeless and forced over 50,000 people to leave their homes and seek shelter in UNRWA schools, as well as mosques and other places with little access to water, food, hygiene, or health services. If there is hell on earth, he added, it is the lives of children in Gaza today. Mr. Guterres said the UN will launch a full humanitarian appeal for funding as soon as possible, and that he is also working on releasing funds from the Central Emergency Relief Response Fund. He added that access for humanitarian goods remains paramount. A revitalized peace process is the only route to a just and lasting solution, the Secretary General said. It is imperative that we keep this long-term vision alive. His full remarks were shared with you. And a number of you had asked me in this room and online about the work of our special coordinator, Tor Vennesland. And in response to those questions, I can confirm to you that Mr. Vennesland is currently in Qatar as part of our efforts to restore calm in Israel and the occupied Palestinian Territory, and especially Gaza. We are actively engaged with all the relevant parties for an immediate ceasefire. For his part, the Secretary General continues his intensive contacts with the parties and pertinent regional and international stakeholders. He held a group meeting today with Arab ministers to discuss the current situation, and he reiterated that we will continue our tireless efforts to bring about a ceasefire, to ensure humanitarian access, and to achieve a political solution that ends the occupation and realizes the two states living side by side in peace and security. The Secretary General also has a number of bilateral meetings later in the day. For its part, Security Council members met virtually this morning on Sudan. The special representative of the Secretary General and head of the UN mission there, Volker Perthes, said that the Paris conference, which the French government organized earlier this week, clearly demonstrated the international community's continued support for Sudan's return to the international community. You will recall that the Secretary General had a video message to that conference, and today's Security Council meeting, Mr. Perthes encouraged all of Sudan's international and domestic partners to continue supporting the country as it implements key economic and political reforms. Regarding the peace process, he said the UN mission will act as a facilitator, supporting the role of South Sudan as a mediator and the parties when required. We're also working to ensure meaningful participation of women in these talks. Turning to Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues are informing us that there have been increased incidents of denial of relief cargo movements and confiscation of humanitarian vehicles and supplies by parties to the conflict in Tigray. Military at checkpoints are aggressively searching humanitarian vehicles and regularly demand that humanitarians provide proof of permission from local authorities or the military. Sporadic fighting and military reinforcements are being observed across the region. Access in some areas, however, is feasible but remains volatile. Our humanitarian partners are gradually scaling up the response, but not yet in keeping pace with the needs. There are 5.2 million people targeted to receive food assistance, but only 1.8 million people have been reached with the assistance since late March. UNICEF and its partners screened more than 172,000 children under 5 years of age and found moderate acute malnutrition at 19.6% of that population. The UN, with our partners, are seeking $853 million for the Northern Ethiopia Humanitarian Response Plan until the end of the year, but there is a significant shortfall of more than $500 million, with $200 million needed immediately before the end of July. Just want to flag a statement issued today by the Peacebuilding Commission following a meeting earlier this week on building and sustaining peace through institutions. The Commission expressed concern over recent challenges of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and preserving hard-won peace-building gains around the world due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Peacebuilding Commission called for the ramping up of collective efforts in strengthening effective, accountable, and inclusive public service institutions. It also called for bold new mechanisms to help countries address crippling debt, which has been sharply worsened by the pandemic. We have that statement been distributed. A few COVID updates for you. The UN team in Malawi, led by resident coordinator Maria Jose Torres Macho, continued to support authorities to fight the pandemic and address multiple impacts. Malawi received its first shipment of AstraZeneca doses from COVAX in March, and Malawi is among the first African countries to roll out vaccines. Today, more than 335,000 people in the country, including those most at risk, such as health workers and the elderly, have received the vaccine. And the UN team in Thailand, led by the resident coordinator, Gita Sabarawal, is supporting the authorities' vaccine rollout process there. This includes upgrading and renovating labs, procuring equipment for local development of vaccines, and boosting training and capacity to enable vaccination. The UN team has also been sharing technology to improve electronic health records as part of the national COVID-19 vaccine reporting system. We're also actively engaged with the communities to address misinformation, boosting vaccine uptake with a campaign that has reached over 26 million people so far. Targeted campaigns are also reaching migrants and people in prison. As of this week, 2.3 million vaccine doses have been administered. 65% of them are first shots. The country aims to cover 70% of the population by the end of the year. And next door Myanmar, our colleagues from UNICEF and the UN Educational and Scientific Organization, together with Save the Children, today said they were concerned for the more than 12 million children and young people who have not had access to organized learning for more than a year. They warned that the consequences for their education, personal development, psychological well-being, and future opportunities are already profound and will continue to grow. Children in the poorest and most remote communities are likely to be the most affected. 3 agencies stress that attacks on places of learning and education staff and the occupation of education facilities are unacceptable. They must be protected from conflict and unrest, since they are places where children should be safe and empowered to learn and develop. And today, as you may know, is World Bee Day, which aims to raise awareness on the importance of pollinators, the threats they face, and their contributions to sustainable development. This year, the theme of the day is Bee Engaged, Build Back Better for Bees. Today, bees, pollinators, and many other insects are increasingly under threat from human activities. Close to 35% of invertebrate pollinators, particularly bees and butterflies, and about 17% of vertebrate pollinators, such as bats, faced extinction globally. Pollination is a fundamental process for the survival of our ecosystems. Nearly 90% of the world's wild flowering plant species depend entirely, or at least in part, on animal pollination, along with more than 75% of the world's food crops and 35% of the world's crops. I'm at your disposal. Yes, Pam.
A quick question about the Secretary General's meetings, bilaterals with all the foreign ministers who are in town. Has he heard about any startup of the quartet for negotiations on the Middle East? And has he heard any news that's being reported about a possibility of a ceasefire on Friday? Thanks.
No, there's nothing yet to announce on a quartet meeting. Mr. Venezuelan remains in touch with his envoy partners. Yes, Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. Both the Foreign Minister of Turkey and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan called for protection of the Palestinian people, and if the UN failed to do that, they said it could be a coalition of the willing to send some civilians to be deployed in Palestinian territories to protect the Palestinians. What is your intake, or what's the SG's point of view on that?
We've seen, I'm not going to, I can't comment in real time on the speeches. For our part, we think the best way to protect civilians immediately would be a halt to the fighting and an immediate ceasefire. All right, see if we have any questions on online. Okay, I think we will then go to, hello?
Oh, sorry. Hi. Hi, it's Melissa Hakeler from Politico.
Hi, Melissa, how are you?
I have a question. Hi, I'm good, thanks. I have two questions. A political investigation that came out today on the harassment scandal surrounding the tech envoy Fabrizio Hochschild. The story showed that the Secretary General Chef de Cabinet's office knew of coming complaints in December, and the OIOS interviews took place in early January, weeks before his nomination. Now, the SG has said that he takes harassment very seriously and yet has seemingly failed to do his due diligence in this case. Why did Guterres proceed with the promotion when some of his staff had a preview of the trouble that lay ahead? And my second question is, the tech envoy's office has a budget until the end of the year, and yet the tech envoy has been on paid leave for almost 6 months. Do you think this case and investigation will harm the long-term survivability of the position and office? Thank you.
Okay, on your second part, I think the two are separate. There is an office of the tech envoy, which has an officer in charge, an acting head. The work of that office continues, and that continues. What is also continuing is the investigation. As we've said numerous times, we want the investigation to be very thorough, but as speedy as possible while being very thorough in the interest of fairness for everyone involved. As for your first question, I think we've communicated on this, and I will repeat what I said on January 27th, which was that the Secretary General was not aware of the allegations that were made to OIOS or being reviewed by OIOS. He was informed on the 27th of January that the OIOS had received complaints and would launch an investigation. As you know, OIOS works independently from the Secretary General on these investigations. The Secretary General took the action that he did at the time, which was to place Mr. Hochschild on administrative leave. Once the Secretary General will take the action necessary once the investigation has been concluded and gone through the process. On the emails, I would say that these were general inquiries, and the person was referred to the appropriate office for action.